Welcome to Based on a True Story, the podcast that compares your favorite Hollywood movies with history. Today, we're going behind the true story with director Robyn Flanery. Robyn is a member of the Alliance of Women Directors, whose award-winning career spans extensive experience in front of the camera, behind the camera, in the editing bay, and so much more. She's worked on based on a true story movies such as The Butler and Dallas Buyers Club, more fictional movies such as Django Unchained and Planet of the Apes, as well as revealing true stories through numerous documentaries, including her most recent documentary series called Profit Over People. But before we connect with Robyn, let's set up two truths and a lie. Now, if you're new to the show, this is something we do on every episode to help you practice separating fact from fiction. So I'm going to give you 3 facts, but one of those facts is actually an all-out lie. Are you ready? Okay, here they are. Number 1, Robyn has a documentary about an Army veteran who lost the ability to walk after being on a reality show. Number 2, while working on Dallas Buyers Club, Matthew McConaughey kept asking Robyn's daughter about the true story behind the Boondock Saints. Number 3, Robyn's own life-threatening illness led to her current documentary series on the failure of the U.S. healthcare system. Got him? Okay, now as you're listening to our story today, listen closely to see if you can figure out which one of those is the lie. And if you're watching the video version of this, you'll see I'm holding up an envelope. This has the answer inside. So we're going to open this up at the end of the episode to see if you got it right. All right, now it's time to get a peek behind the true story with Robyn Flanery. Before we learn more about your film career, everyone watching just heard your last name in the introduction. I'm sure you get this all the time. Your brother is Sean Patrick Flanery, who I will always remember as Connor McManus from the cult classic film The Boondock Saints. So let's start by getting that question out of the way. What's it like having a famous actor for a brother?
Interesting. And I don't think of him as famous because we're barely 2 years apart. So we kind of grew up really tight. And so when people are like, oh my God, your brother, I'm just like, and?
Just your brother.
Yeah, but I live in New Orleans right now. And there's a bar here called the Boondock Saint where they play his movie on loop. And yeah, so a lot of people do ask that question to me on the regular. And he's just a regular dude who's, got kids and is a really nice guy. I mean, he does do the Comic-Con circuit for that movie still. So he's really active in that. And I know that he's written and produced and directed a few things. So it looks like but he spends a lot of time with his kids doing athletics. Mostly that's really what his life is about.
Makes sense. Yeah, no, we're going to talk mostly about your career, but I had to ask that up front because I knew that was going to be what everybody does.
I'm so used to it. I expected it. No worries at all.
Well, you started to go down the acting road back with Student Bodies. It was a horror comedy in 1981. But what made you decide to work behind the camera instead of front of it?
Well, the funny story about Student Bodies is this. I was in a very exclusive private school in high school, and a girlfriend of mine, it was for actors, models, and athletes and things like that. And I wasn't any of those. I was just a science person. But she said, hey, can you drag me to an audition after school? And I said, okay, what's it for? And she's like, I don't know. And she showed me the sides, which I didn't even know what sides were at that time. I mean, no acting experience at all. She goes, come in with me. So I'm sitting in this row of chairs. There's literally hundreds of people there. And this dude walks out of the room and he walks up and down and he points at me. I go, I'm not here to audition. He goes, you are now. Do you know how to scream? And I'm like, no, dude. I'm sure I didn't say dude because I was 17. But I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And my friend says, you should go try. And then I went in and they're like, you got the part. And then that girlfriend, I think she still hates me to this day because that was kind of her dream, but it wasn't mine. So I wanted to learn the science behind film always, but I've had offers to be in front of the camera a lot more than behind, but I struggle on camera. I struggle with that. So I chose to do what I felt was more my speed, which is producing and directing. And first I started out making little commercials for people. And then I started making documentaries about things that I thought were really globally important. But that's kind of how that started. And then Sean moved out to Hollywood after I did that movie, way after I did that movie, because he was in St. Thomas, at University of St. Thomas when he left. And that was the funniest story because we both worked for our dad at that time. And he's just a semester short of finishing college. And I don't even want to talk about all that. But yeah, he went out there and then he got, he really wanted to be in front of the camera. But I never knew that because he was in school for pre-law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a surprise, but he got a big break while he was working at TGI Fridays as a waiter.
Isn't that kind of the classic story? Going to Hollywood, work as a waiter, and then become an actor.
That's what happened. And then so he always had work, sort of rolling since then. And but I also got into it. But I started doing location scouting first. And then before I got my hands on any really big equipment. And doing that, I was able to move from that in because that doesn't pay a lot of money. And it's not like I'm following the money, but you always sort of want to move up. But at least I do. If I'm going to work at all, I'm going to work, up a ladder, I hope. But the next way up was to do housing for A-list actors. So I got to meet a lot of A-listers, and that helped me a lot in getting into documentaries and stuff like that. But also finding them houses when they came to New Orleans to film. So some of them I have NDAs that I can't discuss. Some of them I can. And, a very, very interesting field, I'll say.
Here on the podcast, normally when I talk about the true story behind historical movies, I'm referring to the based on a true story part, the actual history. But I'm super excited to get to change that up with you here, Robyn, because now we'll get to hear some true stories from historical movies that you've worked on, like Dallas Buyers Club with Matthew McConaughey and The Butler with Forrest Whitaker and Oprah Winfrey. What are one or two of your favorite stories from your time working on those movies?
Yeah, I did A-list actor scouting for houses on multitudes of films. Dallas Buyers Club, I ended up showing a lot of houses to Matt McConaughey, and he chose a different one from another person. So I wasn't an everyday person on that, but a lot of my friends worked like solidly on that set for so many weeks. It was a really fun set to work on, and a lot of people really enjoyed it. But that's one that we all have NDAs that we can't even discuss where we showed anything. I can tell you Matt McConaughey talked about Halo with my daughter for a good 30 minutes, and I was like, hurry up, run a schedule, oh my God, But other than that, I can't say much about it still.
I'm just picturing him looking at the house and going, all right. And that's the one he pictured.
He's so cool. He didn't do that. He's not like that in real life. He's like just a regular person. We really nerded out with my daughter about video games for a long time. And she was about to go off to college to become a computer engineer to program video games. So they had a lot in common. They got a lot more talking time than I did. But he's a really, really nice person. So is his wife. They're really stellar people. I don't have anything negative to say about them. And he's really easy to work with. Like super easy. And seems to be, I don't know if he's a method actor, but he very well could be from because it's been on 2 occasions whenever, and for 2 different movies when I've seen different sides of him. So I think he may be method, but I could be way wrong. I don't know. But he's a really nice person. As far as The Butler, that was an interesting experience because I did housing for some of the executive producers and things like that, and learned a lot about the way people want to live as opposed to reality. So we had a lot of 2 a.m. calls from people in houses and things like that for simple things. But I had to be back and forth on set to pick up checks a lot for that. And everybody was lovely. And staying with Django Unchained, the same thing. That was very interesting. The most interesting feature I've ever had any affiliation with ever. Just because of the way that they did it and the way that the stars worked. And I also since my daughter was doing she was about to go off to college. She was in her senior year, and I got her an internship on that film in the art department. And during the filming of that movie, Michael Riva, who was the art director, died. And Paige Buckner took over as the art director. And that's who my daughter was directly working for. And she also side gigged as a nanny for their baby. So just and I housed them. So it was real tight. And I remember opening the refrigerator in the art department. There's notes on everything because everybody evidently they had somebody that went around.
Oh. Not to name names, but somebody, yeah.
It was really fun. Doing all of that is really an interesting psychological study in people and learning how to deal with people, places, and things and not making any of them mad at the same time. It's an interesting and almost impossible job, but I tried to give it my best.
I was going to say the first thing that comes to mind is you can't make everybody happy, but it sounds like that's what you try to do
that.
Yeah.
You try to do that. They all have personal assistants. So but when they're on in the middle of the night, they don't. So you're dealing directly with the stars and the producers, and they don't know how to do certain things. And, sometimes you have to kick in and help or just, read a manual. And back then, it wasn't as easy to Google every single thing or YouTube every single thing and just send them a video. And they wouldn't have put up with that anyway. You have to really go there and go, no, here's how you open this. Here's how this works. And don't shut this way or that will happen. And this, in New Orleans, there's a lot of mixed craft architecture that is very interesting and old. There's a lot of history. So it's not new construction and smart houses everywhere. We do have that, but back then it wasn't so much of that. So there was a lot of, I'm sure people would come in and go, it's a beautiful mansion. I don't know how to work anything. Because it's old school.
Well, and it's a house like this, not the normal house. I could see that too, where it's just, it's new. You think of when you get a new car, you got to learn where all the different little pieces and all the things are. Yeah.
You're right. It is a lot like that. And just the interesting personalities and things that you'd think everybody knows how to do a certain thing. Nah. No. Some people have never done things like making beds or coffee, and that's okay. I don't do that for a living, but I learned that so I could teach somebody how to do that. It's not that hard. But for the most part, that was just a real pleasant experience. The only unpleasant experience I've ever had doing any kind of location or cast and crew work is on a reality show that will forever go nameless. I'll call them Voldemort. It was a year of my life that I would never want to put on my resume again. I don't ever want a job like that again, and never want to deal with that.
I guess you got to have the lows sometimes to appreciate the better jobs.
Yeah, it does. It made me. That's a good point because that's exactly what it did. It made me go, "Ooh, I don't like that for sure." And because the only people that really benefit for that are the viewers, ratings, and the producers. All the rest of the people really don't, and it's made me sad as a human to sort of see people exploited that way. I couldn't deal with it. I have one of these empathetic hearts that now I do movies that are only to do good or to call to action, and that's pretty much it. But I had to find my niche by learning all those things, just like you said. Yeah.
Well, I know we all understand that, movies are for entertainment, so they're not going to be entirely accurate. But the flip side of that, we expect documentaries to be factual. And as a filmmaker who's worked on both historical movies for entertainment, we just talked about some, as well as documentaries, do you take a different approach for these two kinds of movies when you take work on them?
Yeah, there's two totally different forms of development for both. There's research and development for both types, but one of them is strictly creative and the other is factual. And now sometimes on the feature films, if you're using a living character or a public figure, you have to make sure that you're legally accurate. But on a documentary, I know there are some people that do make documentaries now based on their feelings and what they think a situation is rather than doing the research. That's unfortunate that that's happened. I'm trying my best to revive the method that we learned before of always telling the truth and having sources and facts. That's why I said I started with a scientific background because if it's not on PubMed and there's no paper about it, I'm not sure that's a real cure. I want to know. And I worked in the library because I finished all of my electives way too soon and I was in all AP classes. So I worked in the library and I read. People would ask me where the fiction section was, and I would tell them it was the 800s, which is biographies. So that's the kind of I'm like, go learn something. But that I'm not a fan of big academia, but I am a fan of the truth. So I try to seek it out and tell it as much as I can. And I think that's an important part of being a really good filmmaker. And also asking everybody that works with you what their perspective is, so you know where they're coming from.
That's an interesting point too. Yeah, that I've heard just in doing this show. When you talk to historians and stuff, they'll point out that one person's perspective of the truth is different than somebody else's. An example that I always like to give is the Battle of Dunkirk. This huge historical battle, but one person's perspective of that, depending on where they are in that battle, can be very different. They can both be valid, and so telling those stories from the perspective matters. What perspective you're telling the story from too.
Oh, that is so profound and so perfect, because that's something that I think a lot of filmmakers could really learn from. If you only tell it from one perspective, you're really ripping yourself off. Tell the whole gamut and let the watcher, the viewer, decide what they think is best from their own value system. Usually the truth will come out. But if you tell it from only one side, for instance, you see, I guess there are 4 documentaries on the Menendez brothers, and also Diddy, and also Anna Delvey, and there's a million perspectives. But wouldn't it be cool if you could see them all in one? Yeah, that's the way I like to make stuff. People got really angry with me when I made Broken Worlds the Island, because a lot of people on the island that sold property thought that I was going to negate them from making sales. Yeah, maybe so. But the truth is going to get told, and I'm going to tell it, and you can't stop me. Just try. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, just like Sean, people are like, he's a black belt. He might be a little dude. Sean and I are about the same exact height, and we're both tall and skinny, but we're formidable in different ways. He's a black belt, and I think I'm kind of that same way, but with my mind, because I will not let something go until I get to the bottom of it. And people know that about me. They'll sidetrack. They'll be like, I don't need your help. You might want to know something. But then again, I'm just about to do a documentary on a family Hollywood royalty level. Like, let's say it's not John Wayne, but of that ilk. Their whole family and all of their generations now want to tell all their trauma. So we'll see. I want to see what their perspective is from a victim, and from an attacker, and from a, just as a human being, what they think of these stories as. When they write their outlines, somebody's going to tell them, read them their outline back, so they can hear it from a different perspective, so they can go, oh, wow, how does that land? You don't want to just start talking on a live stream and spew a bunch of stuff with no background. So I tend to have my subjects talk about it from their perspective, and then I get all of them together, and then I can sort of go, oh, a ball just formed in the air. It's the earth, and now we have a project. But we have it from all perspectives at that point. And then we can tell it to make some reasonable assumptions and truths, possibly.
Well, you mentioned briefly Broken Worlds, and I want to ask about Broken Worlds, The Island, and Rita's Island. Both of the documentaries tell stories of the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, the Category 5 hurricane that hit Puerto Rico in September of 2017. How did you get involved in those projects?
Well, I lived there I had my vacation house was on that island. And I just sold it in April of 2022. And I lived there for a long time without knowing that, because even in the disclosure of real estate, the realtor did not let us know that this was the island that had been bombed by the Navy for over 60 years. And the groundwater might be environmentally challenged. So I took it upon myself, after finding that out from meeting a person who was an Army UXO tech who worked on the range told me the whole story and said, yeah, they keep trying to cover it up for everybody buying new stuff here. And I went, huh. Then I noticed Al Jazeera went and did an expose on that exact realtor by saying, I'd like to talk to you about your luxury properties on this. Now, I don't go do stuff like that. I'm going to tell them, I don't know what I'm going to do with this footage. I want to interview you. I wouldn't have just turned it on someone like that. But people do need to know, but they need to know that there's also a lot of good being done about it, at the same time. There's cleanup being done. It's a major Superfund site. It turns out that you do have to disclose that. It's a Superfund site on a real estate disclosure. So that's a good thing that people know now when they move there. There's also not a hospital there, and you could step on depleted uranium, and they're it's still radioactive, You can Geiger counter around there and find a lot of stuff. So when I find out things like that, I want to get the whole story. So I did. In the course of that, I met Arita Maldonado, who has a book out called The Zen of Dancing in the Rain, which it's an Amazon bestseller, and I highly recommend everybody read it. She was an Army veteran who was shot in Afghanistan and was on a reality show after that. Did a lot of promotion for herself, but went through a serious evolution in her life of losing capacity to walk and had to reteach herself and everything. And she's won a Purple Heart, which is now in the Smithsonian, So there's lots of cool things that she's doing from that. And that spun off from that. So I wanted to make a special documentary about her that covered why she was even in it, because she wasn't a native or a Taino Indian native of the island of Vieques. But Vieques is the way the islanders say it, and they pronounce it that way. And they're Taino Indians, indigenous people, and they have specific religions and all that. So I wanted to do a part 2 to that to let them know about the culture and what they really respect, because it's an island it's 7 miles off the southeast coast of the island of Puerto Rico. So it's like its own little country. Very, very interesting. There's usually never more than 10,000 people on that island, even in the highest of seasons, and there's not a hospital. So people who have healthcare issues, it's a serious issue. That's why I just finished making, alongside Carrie Mitchum, who's Robert Mitchum's granddaughter. She and I produced and made a show called Profit Over People. The content is all out on YouTube, but we're going to sell the content to a streamer to do a documentary like the 10 Melendez brothers or whatever, that they want to put out. But I don't know. But that's not the documentary about their family. That's a separate project in itself. But Profit Over People is based on the United States healthcare system and how broken it is. And it's got stories from people from all walks of life to verify this. And it's almost medieval how cruel some of the things are that we found out during the making of that. It took us 2 years to make it.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, the island Vieques is where they dropped bombs for like 60 years, and there's also not a hospital on the island for this radioactive. I mean, that just seems not
crazy,
good.
doesn't it? Seems crazy. Oh my God. Let's do a TV show, a reality TV show on this island, and make it about cheap places to live in the Caribbean and sell a bunch of property. And that happened. I bought one. And then I went down there and I found all that stuff out. Now you would think, that's really stupid, Robyn. Why didn't you do the research on it? I was that blue water. It can hypnotize.
I mean, just seeing the footage in the documentary too. I mean, there are some beautiful visuals. It's a beautiful location.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I didn't use, and neither did any editor use any colorization on that. It's natural. That's the way it really is. So you walk out every day and you're like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Oh my God. And then it affects your mind and you get island time, and then you find things out, and you then finally get your mind back after the spell is off from the beauty, and you want to find out what's in the dirt. And that's what led me to that. And some other people were talking about it on the island, and then we made the movie after the hurricane. Really, I went down to the island that visit directly after the hurricane, just to make tourism promos for my friends who own businesses that I thought they had lost, just as a help. I was going to donate my time just to make promos. But I got there, and a lady that I met who worked on the range sat me down and told me the story. She goes, and then the town doctor comes to me and says, Robyn, you're here that you got a whole crew here. You're not making promos. This is what we're doing. And I'm like, tell me what the hell is going on. She started telling me and about all of the cases of the diseases. And so then we started talking to historians and scientists and everybody, and it got bigger than we thought. And after many years of reformatting it, making it, we sent it to film festival and won a lot of awards, way more than I thought. And then we did a spinoff, Rita's Island. And then people just kept hiring us to do different things.
I mean, it sounds like people were just itching to tell their story. And yeah, I mean,
but then they wanted to hate me after I told them.
Well, yeah, I guess that's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, my agent at the time said, Robyn, haters are fans. I'm like, I don't like this. I like this. And he's like, just calm down. It'll die down. And it did. But boy, it was rough. The 2 years that it was on Amazon for our United States people to see, I've never received that level of hatred for anything I've ever done from the most entitled people on earth. Disgusting.
Is this Broken Worlds or Rita's Island, or kind of both together?
Broken Worlds.
Broken Worlds.
Rita's Island was just a love fest.
Okay. I was going to say, because, I mean, her story, since it follows more just her instead of, it is kind of her perspective, but her story, to me, it's like the topic of a movie. I mean, she's in the army, she's on a reality TV show, and then she ate a slug or something, and then like had a 50% chance of not waking up. And then she goes like from running 50 miles before the TV show, being paralyzed, having to relearn how to walk, and then finally sets down there on the island in March of 2017. And then Hurricane Maria hits, destroys the home. Her husband passes away while she's 5 months. Like, it seems like a movie plot line.
I know it is. And I'm sure that I'm sure the right producer will end up making that if it's not me. I don't know if it'll be me. Me and Arita are pretty, tight. We still talk, on the internet a lot. And I love her children so much. The first time I interviewed her, Alex was there. Her husband was there, and she was pregnant. So, I was able to meet him. And this is a really small community, so everybody's really knows everybody. It is the story for a movie, and she's written a book, like I said, the Zen of Dancing in the Rain, and it's a beautiful story. Everybody should really read it. And she's working on another book now. She also is so healthy that she's able to teach dance every day. I mean, well, I think she's gotten down to twice a week or 3 times a week now, but yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I can't wait to, hopefully that becomes a movie to shine more light on her story too.
I hope so. It should. It's a beautiful story. The locations are absolutely fabulous. But I do think that now that I have this type of experience, it should be a Bori who makes it, a Boricua, a person of that culture, a filmmaker who lived there on that land. That's who deserves to make it. I wouldn't mind being a contributing producer or being the director if they wanted to hire me, but I do think that story should be told by them.
Well, if we shift back to movies for entertainment purposes, a lot of people see, the list of names, and there's just this whole screen, black, and then just huge lists of white text of all the different people. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around how many decisions are made across the entire production that can impact, in particular for my listeners, the historical accuracy of movies. I like to use Titanic as an example because, it's the tip of the iceberg of the water, but most of it's underneath. Nobody really sees. So over the course of your career, what sort of things have you seen that have impacted the historical accuracy of a movie for those of us that are just watching it might not even think about?
Gosh, I would think the thing that comes to mind also is Titanic and the amount of scientific experimentation and historical facts that James Cameron went out and got. I mean, there's so much of that changed what people thought about the way that movie was made. And I went into like making Broken Worlds the same way. I wanted to find people who were for it and who were against it and what their reasons were. And in the final cut, I think one of the biggest monologues was cut out, and I would like to put that in. And so I think the way you make decisions can really, really change the inflection and tone of a film in such drastic ways that and the way you cut it. And the editor has amazing control, if you allow them to. And a director and an editor and producer and EP should work like it should be a triad. To get if you're all in the same headspace, that's perfect. If you're not, it's kind of a disaster. So yeah,
I think we've seen those movies too.
well, yeah, we've seen those movies. But I do think a lot of things like there were so many different perspectives of movies on documentaries on 9/11, for instance, that had drastically different perspectives. J6, same thing. So I think it comes from the mind of the storyteller anymore, whereas it should go back to the history and accuracy of a panel. And I think that the panels that we all use as test data for different movies, different scenes in movies even, it can go down to like, does this scene work? Well, let's get a panel and see what they think. You get 12 different or 25 different opinions, and that can help you change things. That's when pickups come in, and you got to spend that extra budget that you better plan for. So it's an integral part of it. But if you also have an auteur, it doesn't play a part in anything because they're going to tell the story the way they want to. And it's all written up beforehand in and you just show up and that's what you do.
Not as much of that designed by committee, it sounds like, with the focus groups and things.
if you're an episodic director for a series, that's all done for you. You don't really have a lot of choices like that.
It's more just...
I don't like that kind of work. Yeah.
Makes sense. Not as much creative.
To me, I would think of it as let's say if you're a cardiologist or an ER doc, you're like doing a shift, right? You see all kinds of stuff. But if you're a cardiologist, you're just seeing a bunch of parts and you get to know those patients. So it's like, your waiter's on a shift, your ER doctor's on a shift, but the manager of the restaurant cares what you think, and the doctor who's going to look at your heart is going to need to know you and all of the aspects of your life. I think that has a lot to do with movie making, how much you want to tear it apart. It depends on, unfortunately, these days, it depends on how much money you have.
Yeah, that's true. I guess money talks, as they say.
Sometimes in my little field that now I have a I consider it a niche field of empathetic call to action journalism documentary. And in that field, you do have a lot more people that go, wait a minute, I wonder what we're sitting here doing this right now. We don't know what they think. We don't know what they think. Why don't we ask them? It's as simple as that. Because when you're doing a really good documentary, sometimes you're out shooting a scene and you're like, there's all these people around. I wonder what they think we're doing. Let's ask them. That's who I am. I'm just so inquisitive. I think I'll die asking a question. And probably the wrong kind of question. I've been told by so many scientists, because I made a scientific documentary recently, and scientists would tell me, you cannot ask me about my intellectual property. You're ruining me. Oh my God. I'm like, what in the hell are you talking about? You have taught me this whole class. So clearly this information is out there. I'm just asking you to elaborate on the subject matter at hand. Some people do not want to do that. So it just depends on subject material, I think, and who the person is. Everything is so different. We call it the film apocalypse right now because we don't know what's happening. Everything's changing to streamers. Independent journalism is happening. It's just not the hierarchy that it was. So a lot of people think of it as we're doomed. And then the other half of the people think, wow, I finally get my shot. The playing field's leveled. So you see what you were talking about. They're two totally different perspectives.
Well, that leads right into my next question, because earlier I mentioned you're acting in 1981 and you're still in the business. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of Hollywood history over the course of your career. What are some of the key ways that you've seen the feature film industry change over the course of your career?
I hate that they sold out to loud audio mix in...
Got to make the theater rumble.
I don't like that. And I don't like that they make prequels, sequels, everything to nonsensical ad nauseum. I don't like that. And that's for money. But then again, I think we're turning a little corner, which I just mentioned. about everybody has a level playing field. A lot of people can produce their own films and try to sell them or put the content out on a public streamer that they use, and someone will come along. What they're doing right now is a lot of people can glean from this little tidbit, which I'll throw out there, which I probably shouldn't. People always tell me you give out ideas so freely, shut your mouth. But this is the truth. If you put out your content, it's decent content. There's Netflix scrapers. There's your internet scrapers that go and scrape for content. And whatever's getting the highest numbers, they'll call to buy. So why not make your own stuff and put it out there? That's what I was talking about, profit over people. All the content's out there. Whenever we mix it correctly and I list it to people that I might know at Netflix or wherever, you might want to take a look or scrape my site. They might have already done it and said, I don't like it. F that. And that's fine too. But, people love and hate you as you go through life. And if you don't get used to that, you're not doing well as a human. You got to get used to all of the stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, you talking about the way things have changed. What's some advice that you would give for the next generation of aspiring filmmakers?
Go for it. And do not listen to people who tell you, oh, it cannot be done that way. BS. Because people told me that a lot. And they're like, oh, pretty little girl, let me tell you how to do stuff. Don't listen to that ever in your life, sweetheart. Go out and do it. You can. And whether it flops or whether it makes you a billionaire, do it from your heart and you'll never be a failure.
Makes sense. I mean, and I love the telling the story, but not being afraid to go out there and ask those questions, because, there will be people that push back on even the questions that you're asking too.
Yeah, some people don't like to answer questions and some people do. But most people want to talk about themselves. So to an aspiring documentarian, I would say, and this might sound manipulative, but go read the 48 Laws of Power. Robert Greene has some things in there. It's not all satirical. Just do it. Utilize rule number 1 all the time. Never outshine the master. Just don't. You might be 10 times smarter than the master. Don't say it. Don't act like it. And don't pontificate on anything. Just take the notes internally and use them for what you need later. That's a very valuable lesson that I think a lot of kids should learn right now. Don't outshine the master until it's your turn to do that. And then take what you learn from them and use it. And I've always done that. There's a lot of people who will love to talk about themselves. And this is a little bit of manipulation, like I said. But if you want to ask questions to somebody who doesn't like to answer questions, start talking to them about themselves. Then they open up. And it's a really good way to make friendships, too, out of people that you ordinarily would have been an adversary with. I don't think I have very many enemies anymore. But who knows? Next project, I might have 1 billion. Depends.
I feel like that's something that has been lost. Just talking to people and just, figuring out where that page is that you can have a common thing. Like you said, a lot of people like to talk about themselves. So just start there. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And they like to talk about successful projects that they've done. And I like to ask filmmakers, like one of my mentors that I took a really small mentorship class with, Jeff Arch. He wrote Sleepless in Seattle. He gave me the best advice. He's like, take out your anger in writing. And boy, that works. It really helps when you're angry. You can use that creative energy to write out a scene. And it's amazing how it can cure you from, you don't punch a hole in the wall. You don't do anything crazy. You just write it down and it affects what you're working on right now, and finish what you start. Don't have 25 projects open everywhere, because believe me, none of them will work. I'm saying this from experience. No, it doesn't work. Pick 3, do 3 at a time. That's okay. Like one in thought process, 1 in development, and maybe 1 shooting, at the same time. But don't have 25 projects open and you're going to be email crazy. Your brain can't handle it. You're just a human. We all think we are more than that. And yes, we have ChatGPT, and yes, we can do work a lot faster, but it's not the same thing as like, if you do things, if your brain fires too fast, it won't rewire as fast. And I'm working with a neuropharmacologist right now on a medical device video she'll be speaking at all of the conventions coming up. She's amazing and doing a TED Talk. But the science that I'm learning from just that and the perspective of the way MRIs can read brains and map people and think things. There's so many, ways you can look at that. I'm just saying, be open to anything, but just like I told you before, learn what you don't like, and then don't do it anymore. Don't make yourself do that. It's not worth it. It doesn't grow you.
Sometimes you don't know until you go through it, though. So that's a definitely a good piece of advice.
Yeah, some people love working on reality shows. Boo, they to them, there's more for them.
There you go.
More for you. Yay.
Well, movies always do a great job of helping the audience kind of travel to another time and place. And we see, especially with the historical movies that we talk about on this show, where the wrong location can really take you out of the story if it's not in line with what really happened. It's just another crucial element to storytelling that I think a lot of people don't really even realize how much work goes into it. So with your experience as a location scout, how do you help ensure that the actual location that we see in the movie aligns with the story that's being told?
Before you go scout, you talk to all of the players. Sometimes they don't want to let you do that. I would say you read the entire script and all of the director's notes and any editor's notes that are already there, because there might be color grading notes, there might be VFX notes, there might be all these things that can change the appearance of places. If you do all that, you're pretty prepared. I would say if you want to be a location scout, go out and do some spec for some big guys. They'll take it. That means free. Go out. They love.
Everybody loves free work.
Yeah, I'm sick. I'm going to be 62 this year, so I'm not doing spec work anymore. But when I was younger, I did a lot of spec work. That's how I got into this. And then journalists came to me and they're like, "How'd you do this? How'd you get the snitch?" And I'm like, "Well, I just started doing it, and then I started doing it for free." Like for instance, the first time the NASA Michoud facility was used for movie making is really kind of because of me, because I was hired for spec to do by Ken Gord, a producer who was getting to make a movie called Silver Cord, and he needed to do 35. He needed to have a space to do 35-foot higher wire hanging stunts, right? So I'm thinking, and my husband was an engineer at NASA. I said, "Those silos are empty right now because we're not doing space shuttle anymore. Can I come out and look at them?" A crazy thing like that. So I got there. And I met with the guy who took me on a golf cart all through the whole secret facilities, and everything was really cool. And I ended up, that movie never ended up getting the green light, but with my big mouth, I tell everybody, "Oh my God, this is the perfect place to make movies." And tons of them. Green Lantern. Well, Green Lantern was at Lake Freck Airport, but Geostorm, there's so many on my resume that did stunts there, but I didn't get any pay for any of that because that was spec work I did. And I could be angry, but no, I'm I'm cool with that they figured out a place to make our little area some money.
I think too, it kind of goes back to what you're talking about. Don't be afraid to ask questions, even if somebody doesn't want to answer. But I mean, the answer might be no, but you won't know till you ask.
Yeah, and that's okay. Just don't be afraid to ask, because the worst that somebody can do to you is say no. And you can just ask as many people as you want, and you can get a whole lot of knowledge that way. Perspectives too. And then it might help you in script writing if you need to make changes. Well, so-and-so I heard on the street said this about this place, and so said that. What do you think we should do, y'all? And you might get a whole team of your data people to tell you, "Oh, wow, that makes sense. Maybe we should change that."
Well, we talked a little bit about some of the differences between like Dallas Buyers Club and documentaries, but you've also worked on some fictional movies like Planet of the Apes. Do you approach your work any differently, knowing that a film is "quote unquote" based on a true story?
No, because during those, I didn't really care what the story was about, because I was dealing with the A-list actors and housing them on those. So I didn't care much about that. But if I worked directly on the show, then yeah, I wanted it to be historically accurate, but I was the low person on the film at that point in time to where I didn't have any say. By the time it got to me, everything was packaged.
Makes sense. I know throughout your career, you've helped some other directors bring their vision to life, and you've also been in the director's chair yourself. Do you find it's easier to tell a story on screen as the director, or is it easier to follow someone else's vision?
It's easier to tell my own story, and also harder. And it's also harder and then easier to tell someone else's. And you have to ask a ton of questions if you're doing someone else's vision, because no matter how they say, oh, my heart's not in this. Yes, it is. And if they tell you, oh, you do whatever you want, they don't mean that. And they don't, especially where it comes to VFX or any kind of thing like that. It's like an explosion escape means 10 different things to 10 different people. So if that's written in the script, you're like, to me, that means somebody walking away from throwing a match, explosion behind them, victory. But to someone else, it means someone exploding out, and that's a whole different thing. So either way, whatever you're trying to portray, you need to develop a deep and intensive relationship with your director or your writer, your executive producer, whoever has gone out and gotten the money for that movie, you need to listen to.
And they're the boss, yeah.
Pretty much. The buck stops there.
Literally, I like that.
Yeah. And on my movies in catering, I don't adhere to this rule at all, that the director always eats last. I'm always the hungriest, so I just eat whenever I want. But on a lot of feature movies, there must be special accommodations for the director in the catering areas, and they make sure that there's the way that they make sure their crew got fed is to make sure there's still enough for them when they get there. And so that's a thing I learned that a lot of people do. And I was like, well, I ordered enough, so I know. I didn't just trust somebody doing a line item on my finance sheet and maybe cut this and not that. That's where if you have a little bit of control, then you don't have to have those types of rules. That's what makes it easier whenever you're telling your own story and you're making your own budget. It's so much easier because it flows easier. But then again, if you get something wrong, it's all on you.
Yeah, that's true.
So it depends. If I want to do someone else's vision, like I just got asked to work on something that was about human trafficking. And for me, the story was too dark and there was too much content. And it was at critical mass. And so I passed. I think it'll be a wonderful movie, but I don't know how many people it will help at this point. So to me, with my vision, what I do, unless it could be a real call to action, it just seemed salacious to me. So I didn't want to do it. But someone else will see that project as not salacious and find a way to help people because it'll fit in with them. And that story would be better told by somebody else. I think getting to the point in your career where you can realize what you're good at and what you're not good at and being okay and being able to throw your ego on the floor and go, I don't think I'm the best person to do this, but this person might be. That's when you're really good, when you can do that. And I'm not saying I'm really good at all. I'm bad at a lot of stuff, but I'm good at knowing what I'm good at and what I'm bad at.
Like you mentioned earlier, talking about reality TV. I mean, that's not for you, but it might be for somebody else, and that's fine. Like they might be good at it too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've referred my friends to it, and some of them love it. I'm like, yay,
there you go.
More for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wait, you talked briefly about visual effects, and I have to ask about your VFX background because before I started this podcast, I worked in CG software. Like RealFlow was kind of my specialty with Maya and Softimage, XSI for those old school 3D. Yep. So I'd love to hear more about your visual effects background. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit about it is pretty much as far as I ever went in the old school way of doing it, So I can't really talk from a place where you can talk from Maya and, writing your own code for this kind. Although I've done that for specific animations, but that's in the 90s,
Yeah, a little different since then.
Totally different since then. So right now, I will hire it out if I have the budget for it. But if I don't, if it's for a little short commercial, I mean, look, I'm not above using a plug and play, drag and drop type of thing anymore. But I also have worked on some, where you use the platters, like where The Mandalorian was made. So you can have a lot more freebies in writing and programming and engineering those scenes. But most people nowadays just want fast, fast, fast. And I think there's an art to it that's lost right now, but I think it's on the way back. So we shall see. I've done a whole lot of like, DIY Foley and stuff like that, which goes along with the FX in many ways, but people don't want to spend money on that anymore. They don't even want a line item. They just, oh, we'll use this app later. Yeah, that doesn't work.
Foley art is one of those. It's just pure magic to me. I'm not a sound person, but just the way they're able to come up with, oh, this sound is this. My mind doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
it's not
like
for me.
if you take like a machete and you have like a very, very hard iceberg lettuce and you whack it, it sounds like decapitation. So
I'll take your word for it. I've never.
I get it. It's 30. It's just nerdy, weird stuff. You're like, well, I bet that sounds like this. You have to you have to listen for about, I guess, a good month or so, or you can take a class in it now, but listening to things. And if you listen more and talk less, it's amazing how many patterns you can find in sound. So perhaps that helps, but I've helped a lot of people find studio space that do Foley, and it's really interesting to learn. And I watched some stuff on audio, and I've some DPs, like my daughter is engaged to a DP who's amazing. And I've learned some techniques, that I would never have known because I have a car that I have a Bronco that has a convertible top. So, and I bought it so I could shoot like crane shots from the top and astrophotography and stuff. So I think I really like the old school ways that when we used to be able to program things and make them unique than the way we use the little drag and drop or overlays and things like that these days. But it's so much more expensive to do that now. So people are taking it like, oh, my eye can handle looking that. I can tell. I've done a lot of betas for a lot of AI VFX and stuff like that. So I can really, really tell when it's not real. And I don't like that. And I know it's not real when you're writing the program either, but it seems a lot more real. Look, okay, for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the cloud progression. Come on. Genius. Can you do that now? You can do some smoke effect, but it's not the same. No. Not to me. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot I don't know. And maybe that since I don't specialize in that anymore, there's a lot of stuff that's better. But I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it kind of sounds like it goes back to what you were talking about before. Like if you have 20 projects going on, you're not going to be able to stop and you're talking about like with Foley art to be able to identify the different sounds. And it almost sounds like another way of saying stop and smell the roses. Like take the time, especially when it comes to something creative. It helps to take that time. And the best way to do that is to not have a million different projects going on at once, but rather just focus on what you can do, know what you're good at, like you were talking about earlier.
You're so right. And it's always that way. I think the older you get, the more you realize that. And maybe I'm just privileged to have been able to have that type of time and other people don't. And I recognize that. But it always helps everything if you put your whole heart into a project. And if you do put your whole heart into a project, then you're real dedicated to listening and learning and experiencing so that other people can experience what's going on in your head. It's really hard to get what's out in here out onto paper or out onto the screen in a way that is relatable to other people if you don't, and especially if you don't do that.
Well, let's say they made a movie about your life. What would the title and synopsis of it be?
Oh, God. She died in the saddle. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I've done so many things and so many projects that it would sort of be like, I think maybe the title would be She Wanted to Do Everything.
Good title.
Yeah, I do. And it would be about all the different things I've learned how to do, because I think the more I know how to build a house, I know how to fly a plane. I know how to fly a drone. I know how to operate multiple cameras. Um, I know a little bit about good lighting and audio, VFX, every aspect of everything. So you just if somebody walks in and they're a green director that never went to film school or anything, perhaps they don't know what the departments are, and what they're for. I think if you sit and learn all of that, like you said, there's a million white names under that just keep scrolling forever. If you start learning what all that is, you're better help to the team. So maybe just do that, and that would be what I would suggest doing. Learn. I think we're put here as human beings to learn. So I could be well wrong. Maybe if you are here to be hedonistic, person and run around naked and do wild things. But to me, it's been about to learn about those people. I want to know about those people, why they chose that. When I was 4, I wanted to join Greenpeace, and so I think I was just born like this to be. People called me, God, you do so much. Superwoman, Renaissance. I'm like, no, I'm really not. I'm a regular person. I just have an inquisitive mind. That's it. I'm not anything special.
Going back to not being afraid to ask questions, and also what you're talking about too, like not to outshine the masters, but to learn from them and soak it in. Go to those different departments, talk to those different people, find out what they do, and learn from them.
And always credit them. Always. Unless they don't want you to, like if they don't want their name associated with yours, you know, some people don't for different reasons. And so you don't do that. And if you do, they'll come and tell you.
Yeah. Usually not shy about that.
Yeah, no, they're not shy if you do anything like that. But for the most part, if you're just trying to learn from the master, and like Robert Greene said, well, I edited this piece of you know uh journalism, and I did a better job than my teacher. I should have never done that. Well, but that also pulls at my heart 2 different ways, because if you're learning from your master, aren't you supposed to go out and do a better job than them? They're the teacher, they're not doing the practice anymore. Aren't you supposed to go out and practice that? So I do have a little bit, there's always a different side. That's why I'm saying there's a million sides to everything. If you can spend your time on your project figuring out what everybody's opinion is on it, then you can tell the story. That's part of being a historian, though. And it's part of why your podcast is so good, because that's what people need to know, especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They don't know, everything's so fast and about hype and followers and popularity. That's fame. Takes you here where things are hollow. David Bowie. I mean, think about what you really want. And if what you want is for people to like you, people don't really like you or even know you if they're just responding to you on social media from a character you play. For instance, my brother. Everybody thinks my brother's like Connor. No, he isn't. He doesn't even have a tattoo, for God's sake. Y'all, he's an actor who does a job well. In real life, he's a very thoughtful, intuitive, he loves music. He'd be a great DJ if he wasn't an actor, I think. He's given me the soundtrack of my life. And, it came from our parents, and our dad loved music, and Sean does too. But I think that taking the time to learn how things used to be done, how you think things will be done in the future, and all the choices you have now, and choosing the best every time makes you a better filmmaker or a better person at anything. Never be afraid to ask questions to people. I mean, if you're intimidated, remember, you're alive right now, and I'm alive right now. We're both wearing meat suits that we didn't have a choice to pick, and we're in the same timeline. So we all have about the same lifespans, basically. So why would you be afraid of asking another being like yourself? You're at a different point in this journey. So they're on the same journey. They're not better than you. Ask them. All I can do is tell you, no, kid, I'm not going to answer that, or F you, or whatever they're going to say. Don't be not afraid, my children. Get out there. Ask questions. This is your earth. Pound it down and learn about it. Watch all the movies, man. Watch all the old movies, and then watch all the remakes and see what you like better.
Yeah, see how they're different. We're talking about with Rita, and just you talking about movies in general. There's just a great way to tell stories to be remembered. We just heard kind of what your movie was going to be, but of course, the whole concept of my show is to compare movies with the true story, and so there's going to be some differences there. Let's throw out the constraints of a movie. How do you want to be remembered?
As a person who really cared about and gave their whole heart to things. I would literally give the shirt off my back, even if it was my last shirt, to someone who I thought needed it worse than me. people know that about me. Also, people think I am very, very mean and harsh. If you get that side of me, you deserve it, and I know that, and I'm okay with that. But I would like to be remembered as a person who considered all viewpoints and who was kind. That's it. Not rich, not famous, not smarter than anybody, but a person who really was inquisitive. Boy, she really needed to ask a lot of questions. That's probably the way it would happen. It's like, damn, she asked too many questions.
But you won't know until you ask. And so I think it's
Right.
great to ask those questions, and because other people too won't think about that sometimes too. I mean, I can't remember, you just mentioned it a moment ago, where somebody else had a different approach on something. I think it was one of the DPs or something, had a different approach. You wouldn't even thought of that. Same sort of thing with questions. You might ask questions that somebody else won't even think about, and then that sparks another question that they have that you wouldn't think about, and everybody learns and is better because of it.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing that I wish people would get back to in filmmaking is teamwork, okay? Like really, really, really using I don't know if hive mind is PC anymore, whatever. But everybody getting on the same thought track. And so you're all sort of rolling things off each other to where you make that perfect. And you can almost see the little glowing sphere whenever the minds come together in the writing room. You're like, we got it. And it wasn't what you originally thought. And if you walked in and just started being authoritarian, telling everybody what to do, you would have never gotten there. So why not just ask and give everybody respect? I don't care whether they are your intern or whether they are the executive producer or God. They are all going to get respect and be treated equally as human beings that are in the same timeline in the meat suit they didn't choose, trying to just live. So respect is really key.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we start to wrap this up, let's end it on a happy note. What's one of your happiest memories from your years working in the film industry?
Oh my goodness. I think getting that shot over Mount Parada, boy, I mean, that was the perfect lens flare. That
I'm going to go back and watch for that one again too. Yeah. Now that I know that there's no extra effect, you just assume there's going to be effects or things like that, and it's like too perfect to be real. But
it's all real. I mean, I wanted to do the low water, high rise, and it didn't even take us. I was blown away whenever I saw that in the dailies. I'm like, no, I was crying. It was that. I mean, it takes a lot to get me to tears. Well, not really anymore, but it that was beautiful. Finding something that just is physically perfect in the world, the film, the celluloid, whatever you want to call it these days, all melds together, and there's just such beauty that it can't be denied. That.
thank you so much for coming on the show to help my audience learn a little more about your part of Hollywood history.
Thank you.
And speaking of my audience, if you're watching this right now, go to the show notes because there's a link to Robyn's latest project. So before I let you go, Robyn, can you share an overview of Profit Over People?
Yeah, Profit Over People is about the failure of the United States healthcare system and how people have suffered and died due to this. And it's a lot of individual stories where people just want to talk about it. And I thought that it was me because I have a disease that is a horrible stage 4 disease. I have had stem cells now, and they're a very wonderful benefactor, and I'm much better because I went from being a terminally ill patient to a chronically ill patient. So I don't want any more GoFundMe money. Thank you, though, for offering. That was really cool. But I don't want to take anything that I don't need anymore because that's not who I am.
I mean, I'm happy to hear that. That much better too. That's great.
It is. But Profit Over People is at Profit Over People on YouTube. And it is a story. There are multiple stories. We go all the way from a diagnosed narcissist talking about how they react. So that's a really interesting episode, all the way to bioengineering and human cells and how they can be manipulated through CRISPR and DNA, to different diseases and how they're treated in different countries as opposed to the United States of America. So it's really interesting. It explains why medical tourism is a $180 billion business and we don't get any healing. Why not? Yeah, we're one of the few developed countries that don't have socialized medicine, and our congressmen and senators do, but we don't get it. That's not fair.
For thee and not for me, as it goes, right?
Right. And so this whole show hopefully will shame them into fixing this. That's our hope. We want to get an audience with Congress. We're attempting to do that.
Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
We'd like to go speak to Congress to talk about why somebody like me has to lose a house in the Caribbean to pay for their illness and then do a GoFundMe, and continue to have to work really, really hard just to scrap to make a living because I got sick when it could have been okay. But a doctor said, you need to turn the camera on yourself, Robyn. Well, I didn't like that, but I did it. And then I went, wait a minute, how can I get out of turning the camera on myself? I tell other people's stories. So that's how it originated. And that's what it's about. And it's tales of really strong things. And also it has some wins too. So runs the gamut.
It's fantastic. I'll make sure to add a link to that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for your time, Robyn.
Thank you so much. Nice talking with you. Thanks for having me.
This episode of Based on a True Story was produced by me, Dan Lefebvre. Thank you once again to Robyn Flanery for sharing her time and filmmaking experience with us. From Broken Worlds, The Island, to Robyn's more recent work with Profit Over People. You're going to find links to everything that we talked about in the show notes, as well as on the show's home on the web over at basedonatruestorypodcast.com/363. Okay, now it's time for the answer to our 2 truths and a lie game from the beginning of the episode. And as a quick refresher, here are the 2 truths and 1 lie again. Number 1. Robyn has a documentary about an Army veteran who lost the ability to walk after being on a reality show. Number 2. While working on Dallas Buyers Club, Matthew McConaughey kept asking Robyn's daughter about the true story behind the Boondock Saints. Number 3. Robyn's own life-threatening illness led to her current documentary series on the failure of the U.S. healthcare system. Did you figure out which one is a lie? Got the answer in this envelope right here, so let's open this up. And the lie is number 2. That fun little story that Robyn told about Matthew McConaughey talking with her daughter for 30 minutes or so was actually about the video game Halo and not the Boondock Saints. Although we did talk about the Boondock Saints as well because, of course, Robyn's brother Sean was one of the main characters in that movie. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed today's episode, I think you'll also enjoy my new email mailing list. These days, with the algorithm, following and subscribing on social media just doesn't really mean the same thing that it used to. So I've started up a mailing list to cut through all of that. You'll find a link to the Boats email newsletter in the show notes, along with all of the links that we talked about today. Or you can always reach out to me directly at dan@basedonatruestorypodcast.com to request future episodes, or maybe you just watched an awesome historical movie or TV show and you want to talk to someone about it. Until next time, thanks so much for spending your time with Robyn and I today, and I'll chat with you again really soon.